A man at the top of his game. Marcus Thorne has everything: a booming business, a beautiful wife, and a new 40 under 40 award sitting on his desk. But he wants more. He wants a younger, more ambitious woman, Chloe. And he's willing to destroy his marriage to have her. He serves his wife, Eleonora, with divorce papers, offering her a pittance to disappear. What he doesn't know is that Eleonora isn't just the quiet, supportive wife. She's the daughter of a financial titan, and his pittance is an insult her father will not ignore. He tried to divorce his wife only to find out her family doesn't just have money. They are the money. Marcus Thorne loved the smell of his own success. It smelled like Italian leather, freshly printed money, and the faint, expensive sandalwood scent of his corner office, which overlooked the glittering expanse of downtown Chicago. At 39, he was the founder and CEO of Thorne Dynamics, a logistics and supply chain tech firm that had just landed a game-changing contract with a major European distributor. He'd been featured on the cover of Forbes as the man remapping tomorrow's trade, and his new 40 under 40 award felt like a crown. He often thought, built this empire from scratch. Tonight was a celebration, a gala held in a cavernous Art Deco ballroom, honoring him and his fellow recipients. His wife Eleonora was at his side, a vision in emerald silk. She was beautiful, poised, and impeccable in her role as the CEO's wife. She smiled, she networked, she remembered the names of spouses and children. She was, in a word, perfect. And Marcus was suffocating. "Eleonora, darling," he murmured, straightening his Tom Ford tuxedo. "Did you speak to Mrs. Harrison about the charity auction?" "Yes, Marcus," Eleonora replied, her voice soft. "She's confirmed her table. And I spoke to the caterer about the gluten-free option for Mr. Davies. It's all handled." "Good, good." He nodded, already scanning the room, his eyes flicking past Eleonora to find someone more relevant. Eleonora Hayes Thorne had been with him since the beginning. They met in college back when Thorne Dynamics was just a half-baked business plan on a dorm room whiteboard. She had been the one to edit his proposals, to pack his lunches, to use her small inheritance from a grandmother to give him his very first seed money. She had sacrificed her own promising career in finance, an MBA from INSEAD, that she never mentioned to support his dream. Now that dream was a reality, and she felt like a ghost haunting its halls. Marcus found who he was looking for. Chloe Jensen, his new COO. Chloe was 28, sharp as a tack, and wore a power suit like a weapon. She was all ambition, all fire, all future. When Marcus looked at Chloe, he saw a reflection of himself. When he looked at Eleonora, he saw his past. "Marcus," Chloe strode over, her energy crackling. "They're about to start the speeches. You were brilliant with the committee from Berlin, by the way. Absolutely brilliant." "We make a good team, Chloe," Marcus said, his smile genuine for the first time all night. He turned slightly unconsciously, walling Eleonora out of their two-person circle. Eleonora watched them, the way his hand lingered on her arm, the shared private laugh, the intense coded language of spreadsheets and profit margins. She wasn't stupid. She had seen the late-night strategy sessions, the sudden business trips they both had to take. Later that night in their sterile, minimalist penthouse, the silence was heavy. "You were quiet tonight," Marcus said, undoing his cufflinks. "I was busy," Eleonora said, sitting at her vanity, removing her diamond earrings. "Making sure your event ran smoothly." "Right. Of course." He tossed the links onto his dresser. "Look, Elle, we need to talk." Eleonora met his gaze in the mirror. Her heart, so practiced at bracing itself, felt a cold thud. "About what, Marcus? Us?" He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. I don't think this is working anymore. I'm moving at 1,000 miles an hour and you're not. You seem happy with your charities and your luncheons, and that's fine. But I need someone who is a partner. Someone who challenges me. I challenged you every day for 10 years. She thought her fingers tightening on the pearl earring in her hand. I helped build the ladder you climbed, and now you're complaining that I'm on the ground. What are you saying, Marcus? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. I'm saying, he said, turning to face her, his eyes as cold and grey as the Chicago skyline, I think I want a divorce. He expected tears. He expected shouting, begging. He had rehearsed his responses. He was prepared for hysteria. Eleonora simply stood up, her emerald dress rustling. She looked at him not as a wife, but as an analyst studying a bad investment. I see, she said. She walked out of the bedroom, not to the guest room, but to the small home office she kept at the end of the hall. She closed the door. Marcus stood there momentarily confused by the lack of drama before shrugging. It was better this way. Cleaner. Inside her office, Eleonora sat in the dark for a long time. The city lights blurred through the tears she had refused to shed in front of him. Finally, she picked up her personal phone and dialed an international number. It rang once. Dad? Her voice cracked just once. It's Nora. It's happened. A quiet, steady voice came back across the line from Geneva. I'm sorry, my girl. Don't you worry. I will handle it. Arthur Hayes was not a man who commanded attention. He was 65 with thinning grey hair and a preference for well-worn cardigans over bespoke suits. He lived in a quiet, sprawling villa on the shores of Lake Geneva, a place Marcus Thorne had visited once and dismissed as old money fading fast. Marcus assumed his father-in-law managed a modest portfolio of inherited wealth. He'd always been polite but faintly dismissive of the older man. Marcus was a fool. The modest portfolio was a myth. Arthur Hayes was the founder and invisible chairman of Hayes Consolidated, one of the largest and most secretive private holding companies in the world. They didn't just own companies. They owned the banks that financed companies, the shipping lines that moved their goods, and the raw material suppliers that fed their factories. Arthur Hayes didn't just have influence. He could alter the GDP of a small country with a single phone call. And Marcus Thorne had just deeply, fatally insulted his only daughter. Tell me again, Robert, Arthur said, swirling a glass of water. He was on a secure video call with Robert Davenport, the lead counsel for Hayes Consolidated's North American operations. Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne Dynamics. Davenport read his voice crisp. He's retained Gavin Pierce of Pierce & Slater, a mid-level aggressive divorce attorney. Pierce is known for high-profile, messy splits. He specializes in hiding assets and bullying the other party into a lowball settlement. He believes I am, what was the term Nora used, a retired librarian. Arthur permitted himself a small, dry chuckle. Something to that effect, sir. He's operating under the assumption that Eleonora is entirely dependent on him and her family has no significant resources. Excellent. Let him operate. What is Thorne Dynamics' current status? Davenport brought up another screen. Highly leveraged. He just took out a $150 million line of credit to fund the new European expansion secured against his company's stock and future earnings. The creditor is First Sentinel Bank. First Sentinel, Arthur mused. That's one of ours, isn't it? Through the Viridian Capital Fund. Yes, sir. We hold a 62% controlling interest in its parent company. Lovely. A thin smile touched Arthur's lips. And his new COO, this, Chloe Jensen. 28, Wharton MBA, aggressive. Our internal metrics suggest she's been cooking the books on their Q4 projections to secure the European contract. It's not illegal, just optimistic to the point of fraud. She and Thorne are personally involved. Our investigator planted a listening device in her office 2 weeks ago after Nora's first call. They are thorough in their strategy sessions. Arthur's face hardened. The contract, the one in Berlin. Bremer Logistics, said Davenport. I know Karl Bremer. We play chess. Have our people at Bremer Logistics request an immediate in-person audit of Thorne's Q4 projections. I want them to cite a sudden concern about market volatility. I want Chloe Jensen to be the one to present the numbers. Let's see how her optimism holds up under a high-powered German microscope. Yes, sir. And the credit line, call First Sentinel. I want a full covenant review, immediately. Cite material changes in executive risk. Freeze the line, pending review. And, sir, Davenport added Thorne's key supplier for his microchips, Apex Materials. Their parent company is also one of ours. Robert, Arthur said, you know I hate micromanaging. You have the full resources of Hayes Consolidated at your disposal. I am not telling you to destroy Marcus Thorne's company. I am telling you to expose its true value. I am telling you to correct the market. The man wants to build an empire, fine. Let's see if it's built on rock or on sand. Understood, Mr. Hayes. And for Eleonora, she will not be using Gavin Pierce's counterpart. She will be represented by Ms. Alani Hassan from Stratton and Croft. The best. But tell Ms. Hassan to wait. Let Mr. Thorne make his first move. Let him feel he is completely in control. Give him all the rope he needs. Arthur Hayes ended the call and looked out over the calm, dark waters of the lake. He wasn't a monster. He was a businessman. And Marcus Thorne had just tried to liquidate his most valuable asset for pennies on the dollar. It was quite simply a bad deal. And Arthur Hayes hated bad deals. Marcus felt a surge of power. The talk with Eleonora had gone better than he'd expected. She had been compliant. She'd moved into the guest wing of the penthouse, and their only interactions were frosty, polite exchanges in the kitchen. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown things. She was, as he'd always known, passive. It's a clean break, Gavin, Marcus said, leaning back in the plush leather chair of his lawyer's office. Gavin Pierce, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, steepled his fingers. She hasn't lawyered up yet, Marcus. That's a good sign. It means she's scared. We're going to hit her fast and hard. What's the offer? Gavin slid a document across the desk. Based on my team's analysis, Thorne Dynamics is valued at roughly $500 million post-expansion. But that's on paper. In a divorce, we argue liquidity market risk and your singular genius as the key asset. Furthermore, I've managed to... He cleared his throat. Reallocate certain assets into shielded trusts. For the purpose of this settlement, we're declaring your primary net worth at a much more conservative $75 million. 75. I like it. Marcus grinned. She gets the penthouse. It's a depreciating asset in this market. She gets a one-time lump sum payout of $5 million. In exchange, she signs a comprehensive NDA and waives all future claims to Thorn Dynamics, its subsidiaries, and your personal holdings. $5 million seems generous, Marcus mused. It's just enough, Gavin explained, to make her feel like she's getting something, but not enough to tempt her into a long fight. It's a go-away number. She can live comfortably, but she can't touch you. She'll take it. Where would she even get the money to fight us? Her father, please. His portfolio probably can't cover the retainer for a decent lawyer. Marcus laughed. It felt good. He was shedding his old life, his old skin. Chloe was waiting for him back at the office. They were flying to Aspen for the weekend. The future was bright. That evening he found Eleonora in the library, reading. He almost felt a pang of guilt. Almost. Eleonora, he said, placing the leather-bound document on the desk in front of her. This is it, the settlement proposal. She didn't look up from her book. Leave it. I think you'll find it's very generous, he said, puffing his chest. I'm giving you the penthouse free and clear, and a significant cash settlement, $5 million. Eleonora slowly closed her book. She placed it on the table. She looked at the document, then up at him. Her eyes were not sad. They were clear, cold, and analytical. $5 million, she repeated. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a valuation. Yes, it's more than generous. It's enough for you to continue your lifestyle, your charities, whatever it is you do. What I do, she said, her voice quiet, is wonder how you, a man who built a $500 million company, can be this stupid. Marcus recoiled. What did you just say to me? Gavin Pierce, she said, tapping the document. Really, Marcus? The ambulance chaser of marital law. He's good at bullying reality TV stars. This is pathetic. You've hidden the assets in the Caymans, the Jupiter Trust, I believe. You've undervalued the European contract by at least 40%. And you've completely forgotten to list the shadow corporation Thorn Holdings that you set up with Chloe Jensen last month. Marcus's blood ran cold. The smile on his face froze and shattered. How do you know that I told you, Marcus? She said, finally standing up. She was an inch taller than him in her heels, a fact he'd always hated. I have an MBA from INSEAD. While you were practicing your visionary speeches in the mirror, I was the one who structured the tax shelters that made you rich. Did you really think I just forgot how You've been spying on me. I've been auditing you, she corrected. Ever since I saw the first reservation for Mr. and Mrs. Thorn at the Peninsula that I wasn't invited to. This proposal, she picked up the document with 2 fingers as if it were soiled, is an insult. It doesn't matter, Marcus sputtered, trying to regain control. It's what I'm offering. You can't fight me, Eleonora. I will bury you in legal fees. You'll be left with nothing. No, Marcus. Eleonora walked to the bar and poured herself a glass of water. You're confused. You won't be fighting me. You'll be fighting my lawyers. As if on cue, the doorbell chimed. That will be for you, she said. Marcus, confused and furious, stormed to the door and ripped it open. A tall, impeccably dressed woman stood there holding a thick briefcase. Mr. Marcus Thorn, she asked, her voice like polished steel. Yes. My name is Alani Hassan. I am a senior partner at Stratton & Croft. I represent Mrs. Eleonora Hayes Thorne. You are being served." She handed him a stack of documents thick enough to stop a bullet. Marcus's eyes scanned the first page. It wasn't a counteroffer. It was a lawsuit. It named him Thorne Dynamics, Thorne Holdings, and Chloe Jensen as defendants. It cited breach of fiduciary duty, corporate malfeasance, and fraudulent concealment of assets. And at the bottom, it listed a motion for an immediate court-ordered forensic audit and the freezing of all his assets, personal and corporate. Marcus looked from the paper to Eleonora. She just sipped her water. "Stratton and Croft," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Their retainer is... That's $1 million. I suppose Dad found some change in the couch cushions," Eleonora said, turning to walk back to the library. "Oh, and Marcus, you should probably cancel that trip to Aspen. I imagine your corporate cards are about to be declined." The word panic was not in Marcus Thorne's vocabulary. He preferred high-stress challenge. But as he sat in his office the next morning, the sun streaming in, he felt a cold, unfamiliar dread creeping up his spine. Gavin Pierce was on the phone, and for the first time he wasn't smiling. "Stratton and Croft, are you kidding me, Marcus? That's not a law firm. That's a financial death squad." "Alani Hassan. She disemboweled the Zelnick brothers in their fraud case. We are out of our league." "Just handle it," Marcus roared. "File a motion, Sue, whatever it is you do. You don't get it." They filed an ex parte motion. "The judge already signed it. Your personal accounts are frozen. Your corporate accounts are frozen. All of them. As of... holy hell. As of an hour ago." Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "He can't do that. The company I have payroll, I have the European expansion, I have to pay the suppliers. You have to call your bank, Marcus. Right now." Marcus hung up on Gavin and dialed his private banker at First Sentinel Bank. "Mr. Thorne," the banker, a man named Peters who had golfed with him last week, said. His voice was all business. "Yes, we received the court order. It's out of our hands. But there's another issue." "Another one?" Marcus felt the room tilt. "Your $150 million line of credit. It's been flagged for an immediate covenant review. Our risk department has cited, let me see, material changes in executive liability and potential corporate instability." The line is frozen, pending the outcome of the review. "What instability? We just won the Bremer contract. We're solid about that," Peters said, and Marcus could hear the discomfort. "I just got off the phone with Bremer Logistics in Berlin. They are concerned. They're sending an audit team, immediately. They want to review your Q4 projections before they wire the first payment." This was impossible. It was a house of cards collapsing in slow motion. "Get me Chloe," he yelled to his assistant. Chloe burst into his office, her face pale. "You're not going to believe this. The Bremer audit? Worse. Apex Materials, our only supplier for the new guidance chips. They just invoked the force majeure clause in our contract. A sudden factory shortage. They're cancelling our entire order. They can't do that. We have a contract." "They can," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "And they're returning our deposit. Without those chips, the entire Bremer deal is dead. We can't fulfill the order. We have no product." Marcus stared at her. The frozen credit line. The lawsuit. The audit. The supplier. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. This was an execution. "The lawsuit," Chloe whispered. "It named me, personally, for fraud." "Marcus, what is going on? It's Eleonora." Marcus said the name, tasting like ash. She's fighting back. With what, her charity luncheon, money. This is big. This is coordinated. First Sentinel Bank, Apex Materials, Bremer Logistics. These are major players. How could she have this kind of pull? Marcus was pacing, his mind racing. He kept coming back to the name on the lawsuit. Stratton and Croft. The cost. Her father, Marcus whispered. It has to be her father. The retired librarian. Who is he? Chloe demanded. Arthur Hayes. I don't know, he's just Arthur Hayes. Marcus grabbed his phone and typed the name into a search engine. Not Google. He used a deep-level terminal, the kind he used for corporate espionage. The first few results were nothing. Philanthropic donations. A board seat on a Swiss museum. Then he clicked on a link to a Bloomberg terminal feed, a dry subscription-only financial wire. His blood turned to ice. The name Arthur Hayes was listed once in a single cryptic line from a shareholder report. A. Hayes, Chairman, Hayes Consolidated Private. Hayes Consolidated. Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. He knew the name. Everyone on Wall Street knew the name. It was a ghost, a behemoth, private equity and holding firm that owned, well, nobody knew what they owned, but the rumor was everything. They were bigger than Blackstone, more secretive than Carlyle. They didn't buy companies. They absorbed them. Oh my God, Chloe said, reading over his shoulder. She pulled up another article, a profile of the world's most powerful people you've never heard of. And there he was. Arthur Hayes. The man Marcus had patronizingly offered a cigar to last Christmas. He owns First Sentinel Bank, Chloe stammered, scrolling wildly, through a fund called Viridian Capital. And Viridian. My God, Marcus, Viridian also owns a 70% stake in the parent company of Apex Materials. Marcus sank into his chair. The sandalwood in his office suddenly smelled like a funeral pyre. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't a divorce. It was a corporate dismantling. He's not just freezing my assets. Marcus realized the horror dawning. He's strangling my company. He's cutting off the blood supply. What do we do? Chloe asked, her bravado gone, replaced by raw fear. We find another buyer for the company. Marcus said, his mind scrambling. We sell right now, before it's worthless. We get out, take what we can, and run. He started making calls to his rivals, to banks, to private equity firms. The response was unanimous. Thorn Dynamics with a lawsuit from Stratton and Croft and a frozen credit line. It's radioactive, Marcus. Nobody will touch it. He was trapped. His $500 million empire was a gilded cage, and the bars were closing in. For 2 weeks, Marcus Thorn lived in a state of suspended terror. Every day brought a fresh hell. The audit team from Bremer Logistics, a group of terrifyingly efficient Germans, had taken over his boardroom. They were polite, silent, and missed nothing. They found the optimistic projections Chloe had created and declared them materially non-compliant. The Bremer contract was officially terminated. The press got wind of it. Thorn Dynamics loses Bremer deal amidst audit. CEO sued for fraud by wife. His stock, which was publicly traded but majority controlled by him, plummeted. It fell 30% in a day, then 50%. His board of directors, once his loyal cheerleaders, were now holding emergency meetings without him. Chloe Jensen had disappeared. The day the lawsuit named her personally, she had cleared out her desk. Her phone went straight to voicemail. She had been his partner, his future. She was the first rat off the sinking ship. Marcus was alone in his sterile penthouse, which Eleonora had already vacated. He was drinking. A lot. He was staring at his frozen trading account, watching his net worth evaporate in real time when the email came in. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from a firm he'd never heard of, Cygnus Capital Partners. The email was brief. Mr. Thorne, we have been observing the recent market volatility surrounding Thorne Dynamics. We believe the company's underlying technology remains sound despite current leadership and legal challenges. We are prepared to make an all-cash offer to acquire 100% of Thorne Dynamics' outstanding shares at 12.50 cents per share, representing a 10% premium on today's closing price. This offer is firm, non-negotiable, and contingent on an immediate acceptance and your full resignation. Marcus did the math, his hands shaking. His stock, once worth $100 a share, had closed at 11,036 talks. The total value of the offer was $70 million, a $500 million company. Sold for $70 million. It was a vulture's bid. A hostile, lowball, predatory offer. It was an insult. He called an emergency board meeting. We can't accept this. Marcus yelled, his voice hoarse. It's a fire sale. We can weather this. We can what, Marcus? Asked Sarah Jenkins, his lead independent director. We have no credit. We have no suppliers. We have no contracts. We have a mountain of debt and a CEO who is being sued for fraud. This $70 million isn't an offer. It's a rescue. It's the only way our shareholders, including ourselves, see a single dime. Who the hell is Cygnus Capital? He demanded. A private equity group out of Delaware, his CFO said, looking at his own research. They're new, seem to have very deep pockets. They're real. The board voted. It was unanimous, minus Marcus's own, now irrelevant, vote. They accepted the offer. The company he had built from nothing was being ripped from his hands for pennies on the dollar. The sale was fast-tracked. The legal teams worked around the clock. Marcus, as a condition of the sale, had to sign the final papers in person. He had to personally hand over the keys to his kingdom. The day of the signing, Marcus put on his last good suit. He felt hollowed out. He walked into the main boardroom at Stratton & Croft's downtown office. The room was massive, dominated by a black marble table. At one end sat the board members. At the other end sat a team of lawyers he didn't recognize. And in the center sat Eleonora. She was not in emerald silk. She was in a razor-sharp, dark charcoal pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back. She looked powerful. And next to her, looking perfectly comfortable, was her father, Arthur Hayes. Marcus, Arthur said, his voice mild as if greeting him at a garden party. Please sit. What are you doing here? Marcus stammered, looking at Eleonora. Mrs. Hayes Thorne is here as a primary party to the divorce settlement, which is contingent on this sale, Alani Hassan said, appearing at his elbow. And you, Marcus spat at Arthur. Come to watch, to gloat. Gloat. Goodness no, Arthur said, adjusting his cardigan. That would be dreadfully inefficient. I'm here as the buyer. It's always good to meet the departing management. Marcus froze. What? Cygnus Capital Partners, Arthur said, is a special-purpose acquisition company. It's a subsidiary of Hayes Consolidated. It all crashed down on Marcus with the force of a physical blow. You, he whispered. It was all you. You froze my credit. You cancelled my suppliers. You orchestrated the audits. You drove the price down. You created the crisis. I did nothing of the sort, Arthur said, taking a sip of water. I simply called in my notes. First Sentinel Bank, as a responsible lender, had to review your over-leveraged position. Apex Materials had a fiduciary duty to not supply a company on the verge of default. And Bremer Logistics, well, Carl Bremer is an old friend. He simply doesn't abide by fraudulent numbers. I didn't create your crisis, Marcus. I simply scheduled it. Marcus looked at the sale documents in front of him. The $70 million purchase price. My shares, my personal shares, are worth about $35 million. Alani Hassan provided, which is fortunate, because the preliminary findings of the forensic audit have uncovered $22 million in assets you attempted to fraudulently conceal. Those, of course, will go to Mrs. Hayes Thorne, as will the penthouse. And the rest, Marcus asked, his voice dead, will be used to pay your legal fees, both yours and ours as per the judgment, and of course to settle the personal fraud lawsuit Ms. Jensen has now filed against you, claiming you made her your scapegoat. Marcus did the math again. 35 million minus sums $22 million. Minus legal fees. Minus I'm left. He breathed with nothing. Not nothing, Arthur corrected him. You're left with your talent, your singular genius. I'm sure you'll rebuild, from scratch, the way you claimed you did the first time. Marcus looked at Eleonora. She hadn't said a word. She just watched him, her eyes unreadable. Nora. Please, he begged. We can stop this. I'll call off the divorce. I'm sorry, I was an idiot. Please. Eleonora finally spoke. Her voice was not the soft murmur he remembered. It was the clear, projecting voice of a CEO. Sign the papers, Marcus. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The supportive wife was gone. In her place was a woman made of steel, with a hand that shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. Marcus Thorne signed away his empire. The signing was complete. The board members filed out, refusing to meet Marcus's eye. The lawyers from Cygnus Capital packed their briefcases. Soon it was just Marcus, Eleonora, Arthur, and Alani Hassan in the vast, silent room. Marcus was a ghost. He was still processing the mathematics of his own ruin. He was going to walk out of this building with nothing but the suit on his back and crippling personal debt. Why? He finally whispered, looking at Eleonora. Why do this? Why not just take the settlement and go? Why destroy me? You think this was about you, Eleonora said, standing up. You think this was all some grand emotional revenge? She walked to the window, looking down at the city. His city. This wasn't revenge, Marcus. This was a buyout. A buyout, he said, confused. You and I started Thorne Dynamics together, she said. I know you conveniently forgot that part. I know you liked to tell Forbes you did it all yourself. But I was there. You gave me some seed money. A few $1,000s. I gave you, Eleonora said, turning around, her voice sharp. $500,000. It was from a trust my grandmother left me. It wasn't seed money, Marcus. It was a Series A investment. Marcus's face went white. That was a gift. No, Alani Hassan interjected, opening a new file. It was a convertible note, which Mrs. Hayes Thorne converted in 2019 on the advice of her father. Your lawyer at the time, the cheap one you hired out of a strip mall, didn't even read the paperwork. He was too busy being impressed by you. Hassan slid a share certificate across the table. Mrs. Hayes Thorne has been a silent 40% equity partner in Thorne Dynamics since its inception. Marcus's jaw dropped. He looked at the paper. It was real. 40%. You owned almost half my company. No, Marcus, Eleonora said, walking back to the table. I owned almost half of our company. The full, devastating truth settled on him. You didn't just sue me, he stammered. You sold the company. To your father. Of course, Arthur Hayes said as if it were obvious. When Nora told me what you were doing, sleeping with your COO, cooking the books, hiding assets, and preparing to dilute her shares with a new, fraudulent round of funding to give to your mistress, it became a simple business problem. The company was sick, Eleonora continued. It was sick with you. You were leveraging it to death to fund your ego. You were committing fraud. You were going to run it into the ground, and my equity, my grandmother's legacy with it. Your divorce filing was just an accelerant. It gave us a legal reason to act quickly. So what was this? Marcus waved his hands around the room. The past 2 weeks. The pressure, the hostile bid. Due diligence, Arthur said. We couldn't just buy her 40%. You'd fight. You'd drag it out. The company would be worthless by the time the courts settled it. No, it was cleaner to trigger a covenant review, expose the rot, depress the stock price, and buy out 100% of the public shares. It's the most efficient way to clean house. Eleonora picked up her briefcase. You were right about one thing, Marcus. I wasn't happy with my luncheons. I was bored. I was tired of watching you run my investment into the ground. You wanted a partner who challenged you. Well, you got one. So the $70 million, of that $70 million, Alani Hassan said roughly $28 million goes to Mrs. Hayes Thorne, representing her 40% stake. Added to the $22 million in fraudulent assets, we've recovered her total settlement is $50 million. Cash. The rest of the $70 million will be used to pay off the corporate debts you incurred. Marcus looked at his ex-wife. She wasn't a socialite. She wasn't passive. She was a shark. She was her father's daughter. You planned this, he breathed. All of it. You planned your exit, Marcus, Eleonora corrected him. You planned to steal from me, abandon me, and leave me with pennies. You just weren't very good at it. You underestimated your partner. That's always the fatal mistake. She and her father walked to the door. Oh, and Marcus, Arthur Hayes said, pausing with his hand on the knob. A word of advice. I wouldn't try to get a job in logistics, or finance, or, well, anywhere, really. Hayes Consolidated has a very long memory, and we own, well, quite a lot. They left. Marcus Thorne sat alone in the cavernous boardroom, the signed, worthless papers in front of him. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and utterly, totally bankrupted by the partner he'd cast aside. 1 month later. The sign on the gleaming glass building in Chicago still said Thorne Dynamics. But inside, everything had changed. The aggressive Shark Tank atmosphere was gone. The sandalwood scent in the corner office had been replaced by the faint, clean smell of green tea and old books. The office once Marcus's was now Eleonora's. But the company wasn't Thorne Dynamics anymore. The day after the sale, a press release went out. Thorne Dynamics acquired by Cygnus Capital, renamed Hayes Sustainable Logistics, HSL. The new CEO was announced as Eleonora Hayes. She was not, as Marcus had been, a visionary. She was an operator. Her first act as CEO was to fire the entire executive suite that Marcus and Chloe had built. The yes men, the corporate climbers, the bullies. They were all gone. Her second act was to call a company-wide meeting. She stood in front of the employees, not on a stage, but on the main floor. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying without a microphone. "I know the last few weeks have been volatile. My name is Eleonora Hayes. Many of you knew me as Marcus Thorne's wife, but as of yesterday, I am your new CEO, and more importantly, I am the founder of this company." A murmur went through the crowd. 20 years ago, she continued, I co-founded this company with a simple idea to make supply chains smarter and more efficient. Somewhere along the way, that vision was lost. It became about ego, about profits over people, about disruption for its own sake. She pointed to the new logo being projected on the wall. Hayes Sustainable Logistics is a new company. Our mission is not to be the biggest. It's to be the smartest. We are going to rebuild our reputation. We are going to rehire the suppliers we lost on fair terms. We are going to renegotiate with Bremer Logistics with real numbers. And we are going to invest 20% of our profits back into R&D for green logistics. We are going to be a company we can be proud of. She wasn't a charismatic speaker like Marcus. She didn't use buzzwords, but she spoke with an authority that was absolute. It was the authority of competence. Arthur Hayes was not involved. He had provided the capital, but this was her ship. He was back in Geneva playing chess. Eleonora rolled up her sleeves. She spent the next 6 months in the trenches. She worked 18-hour days. She learned the names of every employee on the warehouse floor. She personally flew to Berlin and met with Karl Bremer. She laid her books open. These are our real numbers, Karl. This is what we can actually deliver. No optimism, just data. Karl Bremer, a man who had known her father for 30 years, looked at her, then at the data. He smiled. It is good to finally be speaking with an adult. You have a deal, Ms. Hayes. She rebuilt the company not on sand, but on rock. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne was discovering the true meaning of radioactive. His name was poison. He'd tried to get a job at a rival firm. The CEO, a man he'd known for years, wouldn't even take his call. He tried to start a new consultancy. No one would hire him. He'd been blacklisted. Not just by Hayes Consolidated, but by everyone. No one wanted to risk angering the silent giant. He was seen 6 months after the divorce, working as a consultant from a shared office space in a generic suburban strip mall. He was driving a leased Toyota. The penthouse was gone. The Tom Ford suits were gone. He was just a man. His last desperate attempt at dignity was to try and reconnect with Chloe Jensen. He found her. She was not as he'd imagined ruined. She was working as a junior vice president at a major New York bank. He ran into her at a coffee shop in Midtown. "Chloe," he said, trying to summon his old charm. She looked at him, her eyes cold. "Marcus, I just wanted to see how you were. That was a mess back there. I'm sorry you got caught up in it." Chloe laughed, a short, bitter, mirthless sound. "Caught up in it, Marcus, you tried to throw me under the bus. You were going to let me take the fall for the fraud you told me to commit. It was a crazy time. Look, I'm starting something new. Smaller, but smart. I could use someone like you." "Someone like me," she said, picking up her coffee. "You can't afford someone like me, Marcus." I landed on my feet. I gave Alani Hassan everything I had on you. Every email, every text, every recorded conversation from your strategy sessions. That's why I wasn't sued. I was a witness. She had traded her loyalty to Marcus for her own immunity. A clean transactional betrayal. You sold me out, he whispered. You taught me how Marcus, she said. You taught me that loyalty is for suckers. You taught me to always look for the upgrade. She looked him up and down at his off-the-rack suit. This is not an upgrade. Goodbye, Marcus. She walked out, leaving him standing there, the smell of burnt coffee in his nostrils. He was alone. Truly, finally, alone. A year passed. Hayes. Sustainable logistics. HSL was not just stable, it was thriving. Eleonora had done what Marcus had only talked about. She had secured the future. By focusing on sustainable green tech, she had opened up a new trillion-dollar market of ESG-conscious corporations. HSL was the new darling of the industry. Eleonora was at her desk reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant buzzed. Ms. Hayes, there's a Mr. Thorne here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. Eleonora paused. She felt nothing. No anger, no fear. Just curiosity. Send him in. The man who walked in was barely recognizable. Marcus Thorne had aged a decade in a year. His suit was ill-fitting. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look. Eleonora, he said, his voice quiet. Marcus, what can I do for you? She asked, not standing up. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the vast office. His old office. I just wanted to see you. You're seeing me. Is there anything else? I'm struggling, Elle. He admitted the words tearing out of him. I can't get a job. I can't get a loan. I'm ruined. No one will they won't even have lunch with me. And what does that have to do with me? Couldn't you make a call? He begged. For me, just tell them I'm not a bad guy. Tell your father to call off the dogs. Eleonora leaned back in her chair. She studied him. The visionary. The man remapping tomorrow's trade. He was just a small, scared man. My father didn't do anything, Marcus. He hasn't thought about you since the day the sale closed. You did this. The world is built on reputation. And you? You burned yours to the ground. You were disloyal to your wife. You were fraudulent with your clients. You were a bad CEO and a worse human being. The dogs, as you call them, aren't called off. They're just the consequences of your own actions. But I have nothing, he whispered. I'm living in a studio apartment in Evanston. I'm driving for Uber. You're not left with nothing, Marcus, she said, echoing her father's words. You're left with your singular genius. You're left with yourself. And it seems you're finding out what a poor investment that is. Please, Nora, he said, taking a step forward. I loved you. I still love you. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Eleonora stood up. The movement was sharp, final. No, Marcus. You didn't make a mistake. You are the mistake. You're a man who confuses power with value. You're a man who sees loyalty as a liability. You didn't love me. You loved what I did for you. You loved the support. You just Forgot to check who was signing the checks. She walked to the door and held it open. "I have a meeting with the Port of Antwerp," she said, her voice polite, dismissive. "You should go." He looked at her, his eyes searching for the Nora he knew, the soft one, the one who would forgive him, who would fix this. She was gone. Defeated Marcus Thorne turned and walked out of the office he had built, out of the company he had founded, and out of the life he had destroyed. Eleonora watched him go. She closed the door. She did not look back. She had work to do. 3 years later. The setting a large, warm, sunlit office in Geneva. Arthur Hayes was sitting at his desk, reading. Eleonora sat across from him, sipping tea. They were in a comfortable, familiar silence. "The new hydrogen fuel cell division at HSL is performing exceptionally," Arthur said, looking over a report. "Your profit margins are 20% higher than even my most optimistic projections. We got lucky with the new EU regulations," Eleonora said, smiling. "It's not luck, Nora. It's preparation. You were ready. You saw the turn in the market before anyone else did." He put the report down. "You've done it. You've truly built a company on rock." "We built it," she corrected him. "I just moved the obstacles," he said. He looked at her, his eyes full of a deep, quiet pride. "Which is why I've made a decision. I'm tired. I want to play chess. I want to see the world. Hayes consolidated. It needs a new hand at the wheel." Eleonora's heart stopped. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm retiring," he said simply, "and I'm naming you my successor. The board has already approved it. You are the new chairwoman of Hayes Consolidated." Eleonora was speechless. This wasn't a company. This was an empire. A global, invisible $500 billion empire. "Me," she whispered. Not one of your partners. No, it has to be you, because you're the only one I know who doesn't want it. You're not like Marcus. You're not driven by ego. You're not driven by a need for power. You're driven by a need for competence, for things to be done right. That's what this company needs. A builder, not a gambler. Eleonora looked out the window at Lake Geneva. She thought about her journey, the quiet, supportive wife, the humiliated woman, the calculated cold investor, the CEO who rebuilt a broken company. And now, this. She thought about Marcus briefly. She'd heard he'd moved to Southeast Asia, trying to start some small import-export business. He was irrelevant, a ghost from a different life. She thought about Chloe, who had risen fast at her bank and then fallen just as fast in a compliance scandal. A transactional life has transactional ends. And then she thought about herself. "It's a big chair to fill," Eleonora said. "You'll grow into it." Arthur smiled. "You always do." Eleonora Hayes stood up and looked out at the lake. She had been the supportive wife, the silent partner, the avenging angel, and the CEO. Now she was the inheritor. She had lost her husband, but she had gained the world. She hadn't just taken her power back. She had taken all of it. She turned back to her father, a small, competent smile on her face. "All right," she said. "Let's get to work." And that's the story of how one man's arrogance and betrayal led to his complete and total ruin. Marcus Thorne thought he was trading up, but he had no idea what he was trading away. He didn't just underestimate his wife. He underestimated her power, her intelligence, and her father. He learned the hard way. Don't write a check with your ego that your reality can't cash. What did you think of Eleonora's move? Was it brilliant business or was it cold-blooded revenge? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories about karma, drama, and justice, you are in the right place. We post new real-life drama stories every single week. To make sure you don't miss the next one, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. And if you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and share it with a friend. It helps the channel more than you know. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.